Most people design their yard backwards. They plant a lawn that costs money to maintain, borders that produce nothing, and maybe a few tomato plants in summer if they remember. Then they spend $300 a month at the grocery store buying food that traveled 2,000 miles to reach their plate. But there is a better design pattern. It is called foodscaping, and it turns every zone of your property into a production system that feeds your family 12 months a year without looking like a farm. This is not about ripping out your landscaping and planting rows of corn in the front yard. This is about understanding that every plant in your yard is either contributing to your food security or it is just decoration. And decoration does not feed anyone. The concept comes from permaculture design, which divides a property into zones based on how frequently you access them. Zone 0 is your house. Zone 1 is right outside your back door. Zone 5 is wild forest you never touch. And most suburban properties only use zones 0 and 1, which means they are wasting 80% of their land. Here is what changes when you start thinking in zones. Zone 1 becomes your daily harvest area. This is where you put salad greens, herbs, and anything you use in small quantities every single day. You place these plants within 10 steps of your kitchen door, because if you have to walk across the yard in January to grab parsley, you will not do it. You will buy parsley at the store instead. Zone 2 is your weekly harvest area. This is where larger vegetables go. Things like cabbages, kale, root crops, anything you harvest once or twice a week rather than daily. Zone 2 can be 20 or 30 steps from your door because you are not accessing it as often. Zone 3 is your seasonal production area. This is where you grow bulk crops that you harvest once and process all at once. Potatoes, winter squash, dry beans, things you store or preserve. Zone 3 can be farther out because you only visit it a few times per season. Zone 4 is your perennial food forest. This is where fruit trees, berry bushes, and perennial vegetables live. You plant it once and it produces for decades with minimal maintenance. Zone 4 requires the least frequent access but provides the highest long-term return. Most people skip straight to Zone 3. They plant a big vegetable garden 50 feet from their house, fill it with tomatoes and peppers, and then wonder why they let half the harvest rot because walking out there every day feels like a chore. The solution is to reverse the process. Start with Zone 1. Plant what you eat most often in the most convenient location. Then expand outward only after Zone 1 is fully productive. But here is where it gets interesting. You can layer these zones vertically, not just horizontally. Your Zone 1 does not have to be a flat bed of lettuce. It can be a vertical wall of herbs right next to your back door. It can be a windowsill with microgreens. It can be a hanging basket with strawberries. And Zone 4 does not have to be a distant orchard. It can be a single dwarf apple tree in your front yard that looks like landscaping, but produces 60 pounds of fruit every fall. The neighbors see a beautiful tree. You see lunch for 3 months. This layering principle is what separates foodscaping from traditional gardening. You are not choosing between aesthetics and production. You are designing a system where aesthetics and production are the same thing. And the timing matters more than most people realize. A Zone 1 salad garden planted in April will produce for 3 months and then die in the summer heat. But a Zone 1 salad garden planted in August and protected through winter will produce fresh greens for 9 months straight. Which brings us to the real question. What exactly should you plant in each zone? Zone 1 should hold what you actually eat, not what you think you should grow. Most people fill their Zone 1 with lettuce because every gardening book tells them to. But if your family eats spinach 3 times more often than lettuce, plant spinach. If you use cilantro in everything, dedicate half your Zone 1 to cilantro. The goal is to eliminate grocery store trips for ingredients you use constantly. A typical Zone 1 includes parsley, chives, thyme, and whatever salad greens you consume daily. You're harvesting small amounts frequently, so these plants need to tolerate repeated picking. Winter lettuce varieties like Winter Density work because you pick outer leaves and the center keeps growing. Same principle applies to perpetual spinach and corn salad. which both regrow after harvest and withstand freezing temperatures without protection. Zone 2 gets your weekly vegetables. Kale belongs here because you're not eating it every single day, but you're harvesting it once or twice a week through winter. Plant kale in August, let it establish roots before frost, and by December, you have plants producing leaves until March. Savoy cabbage fits Zone 2 perfectly. Plant in July, harvest starting in December. Each head feeds 4 people for multiple meals, so you're not out there daily. Leeks stay in the ground all winter. Earth them up in November, then dig as needed. 20 leeks planted in spring after early potatoes will give you 1 meal per week all winter. Brussels sprouts produce 50 to 100 sprouts per plant over several months. You harvest weekly, stripping off the lower sprouts as they mature while the upper ones keep developing. Zone 3 handles bulk production. This is where you grow the crops you harvest once and process in quantity. Parsnips and rutabagas stay in the ground until you need them, but you typically dig them all at once in late winter and store them in a root cellar. Winter squash grown in summer and cured in fall lives here because you harvest the entire crop in September, store it, and it feeds you through February. Same with dry beans and potatoes. These crops require minimal daily attention, but give you months of stored food from a single harvest day. Zone 4 is your perennial system. Rhubarb planted once will produce for 20 years. Force it in winter by covering crowns with barrels packed in manure, and you get tender pink stems in February when nothing else grows. Fruit trees pruned correctly will give you harvests for 30 years. Berry bushes produce with almost no work once established. You visit Zone 4 occasionally to harvest, but the system largely runs itself. Now here's what makes this actually work. You don't build all 4 zones at once. You start with Zone 1 only. 10 square feet of herbs and greens right outside your door. You plant it, you harvest from it daily, and you learn what you actually use versus what sounds good in theory. Most people discover they planted twice as much basil as they need and not nearly enough parsley. After 1 season of Zone 1, you know your patterns. Then you add Zone 2 the following year. Then Zone 3. Zone 4 comes last because it requires the most planning and the longest commitment. The timing calendar matters more than the zone layout. Winter vegetables must go in during summer. Kale in August. Savoy cabbage in July. Leeks in spring. Spring cabbages in October. If you miss these windows, you wait another year. There's no catching up, and the harvest window is equally specific. Brussels sprouts taste terrible before frost and incredible after. Parsnips left until January are sweeter than parsnips pulled in October. You're not just growing food. You're timing biology to align with flavor chemistry. That's what separates someone who grows vegetables from someone who grows food worth eating. The difference between a yard that costs you money and a yard that feeds your family is just a matter of zones. You already have the space. You're already maintaining plants. You're just maintaining the wrong ones. Replace 1 ornamental shrub with a blueberry bush, and you've added 15 pounds of fruit to your annual harvest. Swap your front lawn for a clover ground cover with stepping stones and tuck dwarf fruit trees into the design, and suddenly you're producing 100 pounds of apples while your neighbors are paying someone to mow grass. This isn't radical. This is just intentional. Start with 10 square feet next to your kitchen door. Plant what you eat most. Harvest it for 3 months and see what actually gets used. Then expand 1 zone at a time based on what you learned. By year 3, you'll have a system that produces food 12 months a year, costs less to maintain than a traditional landscape, and looks better than most yards on your street. The grocery store will still be there. You just won't need it for fresh produce anymore. Your yard will handle that.